Good morning. I'd like to welcome everybody to a special meeting of the Ulysses Town Board. It is Tuesday, September 20th, 2022 at 11:01 a.m. We have an agenda for this meeting. Carissa, would you do a roll call, please?
Sure. Ms. Olson,
Present, remote for extenuating circumstances.
Ms. Marino, here. Mr. Boggs.
Present.
Excellent. The only items on our agenda are privilege of the floor and a discussion regarding the A Fund 2023 draft tentative budget. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Motion to approve as presented.
Second? Is there a second?
Yeah.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone on my screen who's attending remotely from the public. Is there anybody present from the public?
Nope.
No.
Okay, then we will just move right on past privilege of the floor onto our new business. Okay, let's resume the A Fund conversation. Michelle, take it away.
Sure, okay, so, any changes that were made between when you got your first packet for the A Fund and what's on the screen today, or which was on in your packet yesterday, I highlighted them in red, so we'll point those out. We can circle back to those and discuss those if needed. So, we, basically have been doing this a little bit different for each fund, but I think opposed to a line by line, I can take us to the different sections that we need to circle back to. There were some sections from the meeting on the 13th that I wanted Caitlin to be present for, and she wasn't able to make it that day, so those are in green. And then what's in that beige color are the ones that we have separate meetings for. So we will be reviewing, for instance, the town court portion of the A Fund on Thursday. So at this point, what I'm suggesting is that we go through a brief review of the white lines, if anyone would like to circle back to any of those, and then go to those green sections. So that's my suggestion at this point.
So I have a question,
Sure.
which is, does this reflect the changes, agreements that were made when we had the last day one budget meeting?
Most of them, I believe.
Because like there was a long discussion about the contingency account, which I brought up. And we decided to cut that down and at least take 15, I know there's 30,000 in there, but at least take 15,000 out and put it in help a particular health. In employee benefits contingency or something like that, and it doesn't look like this is reflected that way at all.
Right, so do you see how that line was added
No.
below it? Below the contingency, there's the A 1990.41.
Oh, okay, so that's gonna be,
Yeah,
that's gonna reduce the above one by
Yeah.
15,000.
and I have been going back and forth about, because this is the first year that we're doing this, I've been going back and forth about what version to leave. You know, basically, I'm considering these sections to be developing the draft tentative budget. But in this particular instance, I changed that in the tentative budget line, opposed to changing it in the draft tentative. So I'm sorry for the confusion on that one. But yes, that's the intention there is to add that per your suggestion.
Or just, I'm just sorry, these are trying to track the changes that we made in the meetings, yes.
Right, so. Right. So the method for tracking the discussions during the meetings is not very well flushed out. I have the changes that I've made between now and then in those red, so I'm hoping that, and then I've made some notes in the 2023 notes column. So hopefully I'll have a better system in the future for being, documenting those conversations a little bit more. So, but yes, in the tentative budget, you will see that portion of the contingency fund in the 1990.41. So, I want to start at the top. And if I'm just curious about what, we talked about this on the 13th, but circling back, if there's any inclination about that town board PS line right now, it's at 2%. Does anyone have any feelings about anything different at this point? Just want to provide another opportunity to discuss that. At the board retreat, we said 2%, so I'm going to stick with that unless anyone has anything different that they want to talk about. Alrighty, so we'll scoot down to the supervisor office lines there. And the big differences that you'll see here, those the 4% increase for town staff and full-time elected officials. And Caitlin, if you want to explain our current thinking about the administrative support.
Yeah, we built in some administrative support for the office for the 2022 budget. But as I promised the board last year, I wasn't going to go out on January 1st and hire a secretary. I didn't do that, obviously. We have looked at a variety of permutations for administrative assistants. We are, I think, for terms of higher capacity professionals, we're pretty well stocked in the town. I think you can always use more, but I think we're otherwise pretty well stocked. But what is a town-wide issue, quite honestly, is some of the basic administrative assistance to kind of keep the wheels turning, allowing higher paid staff to focus on the bigger projects that we are constantly trying to balance and take on. And so we've been looking at different iterations of what administrative assistance to the town looks like, based on the challenge of finding a deputy clerk. It took quite a while. There's interesting employment challenges currently happening. It's completely unrealistic based on the amount of money that's been allocated for the position in 2022 to have found somebody who wants to come in really realistically at a higher capacity for a handful of hours. So in communication with the planning department in particular, the planning department, and there's been a push on the board for wanting more enforcement, and the part of what would make our enforcement and just simply serving the building department needs or building code needs is having administrative assistance, because that's really where the place to grow. We really don't think it's appropriate to hire at this point. We don't see a demonstrated need to hire another full-time code officer. Good luck finding a part-time code officer right now. There are other towns that have been looking for months and months and months. So it's not like there's a surplus of people necessarily wanting to fill a part-time position. But one place that we have looked at is kind of consolidating administration into, an administrative assistant level position, a project manager type position, in fact, and that would be that's the job description we're looking at right now. Is a project assistant. It would be a position that you can have full-time up to 18 months, but it's obviously broken under civil service. It doesn't have to go before civil service. You don't have to pass a civil service exam, so it's an exempt position. You can get more than 18 months out of somebody who's not working full-time, and it would not permanently create a new position in the town. And so what we're looking at right now, and what I'm going to be bringing to the board next week, is a proposal to advertise for a project assistant. And that project assistant could capture some hours in the supervisor's office, which with the money dedicated in 2022 and the money proposed for 2023. We're looking at is it 7 hours, right? Am I 7 hours? Is that correct? Within the supervisor's office, and then a balance of 8 hours in in the planning department. Part of this would actually help provide assistance to could provide comprehensive planning assistance, could actually clerk for the planning and BZA. Roxanne has indicated wanting somebody to take minutes for the water source protection group. And so the idea was that those different jobs could be assumed into the project assistant position, as well as helping with the comprehensive plan and facilitating a transition within the planning department, in addition to like helping run schedules. And again, it's 8 hours is not a tremendous amount of time, but as a starting place there to see, support for actually filling out some of the routine forms, having been provided the information from the code officer, helping with the comp plan stuff, as I said, helping with the scheduling, serving as a public interface for a few hours a week. Part of the challenge in the planning and zoning office is always just the drop-ins who understandably want to interface with somebody, but it's not realistic for our planner and zoning or planning and code officers to basically stop the work they had scheduled working on ongoing projects to immediately shift gears on a daily basis to whatever new issue is coming through. You don't want the new issue to obviously not be responded to, but it creates an added level of stress and frankly inefficiency to constantly be providing that in-person service at the same time when somebody else could actually review applications and be like, okay, great, you've got parts 1 through 3 filled, but we also, in order to process this form, we're also going to need parts 5 and 6. So that's the proposal, is that we would, ultimately go and start drawing down some of the money budgeted for 2022. But it would be in that project assistant line that would be shared with the planning department.
So just a couple questions on that. That all makes good sense. So one question is, in this budget, so there's a line that says project assistant PS supervisor. That sounds like it's what you're talking about, right? But then the line in the budget is secretary, not project assistant.
Yeah,
Is that supposed to be switched?
no, so that 1220.4.14
Yeah.
was where my salary, a portion of my salary was coming out last year. So
But what the way Caitlin just described this was as a project assistant position.
right,
That was 7 hours a week in the supervisor's office.
right.
So is that something additional that's not on the line here?
So the reason why they were different is that in the 2021 budget, we had. They were 2 different positions. They were being used by 2 different people. So now that my salary line is in the budget officer PS, we could
Well, I'm
move it over.
trying to understand based on what Caitlin just said, which I think makes good sense. It seems like that should be project assistant, not secretary. That's what she just said. It was going to be a project assistant.
Yeah,
Well, part of the reason is that we literally decided on the project assistant. It's been a complicated process to figure out the right position within civil service that we were eligible for. We decided, or I should say, I decided on this yesterday.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
So I think that's part, we can, I don't have a problem moving money around on the lines, but that's the reflection of, it's the same kind of work we want to get done, but last year was allocated under secretary of the supervisor. I don't think it matters necessarily if it's reallocated to the project assistant line, but Michelle didn't have that information when she circulated this last
Okay.
week.
It's not the money though, but it's the
No.
name, right?
Yeah, it's just where it goes.
Yeah,
It's
15.
reflecting what it is. We're not hiring a secretary to this.
So are you
We're
saying
hiring a
there's
project. assistant.
another 8 hours in the BCom under planning?
Yeah,
Yeah, we actually allocated money in the 2022 budget to start putting time towards hiring somebody. And we've just never used it. And the reason we haven't used it, and it was very deliberate that I didn't trigger it, is because we wanted to hire a planner first and then have that planner be a part of the process to hire whoever the administrative assistant.
So we're talking 15 hours though, right?
We're talking 15 total hours shared between the two, the supervisor's office and the planning department.
Right, so my question, another question I had adding on to that, I mean, I wasn't arguing it wasn't a good idea with regard to those lines, I just think it should reflect the appropriate thing, and at least it used to be that you couldn't have a secretary and a bookkeeper, like they wouldn't let you have those things in civil service as exempt, so it makes a lot more sense to me to put the project assistant there the way you're describing. So then the question about the 15-hour total is, well, is 8 hours enough in all of that B fund stuff with taking notes through the various committees and doing all the interface things? And then a related question to that is with regard to our benefits and all, is there a certain cutoff, like part-time, that where you're eligible for things like health insurance or something like?
Yeah, it's 20 hours.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, does it make sense? I mean, it would obviously increase the cost of the whole thing, but if it's not, if it might not be enough in the B fund to accomplish all of that, then if you look for a person who's 20 hours a week, it may matter to them that they can get health insurance. It might be easier to find a person. And so I'm suggesting that maybe we want to think about that and pad it a little bit more, because you're talking about having them also sitting there to interface with. I mean, I think it's all great what you said. I'm not arguing against it at all. I'm just.
No, I hear what you're saying.
More of it.
One thing that we did do in the B fund is add, it's 8 hours a week plus 4 hours a month for outside meeting time. Beyond the office.
But so the project assistant would be 12 hours a week in the B fund?
No, it's 4 hours a month.
Oh,
For-
much.
Yeah, that's how we budgeted. So, it'll be an hourly position. And the way that we budgeted was 8 hours a week in the B fund. Plus 4 hours total a month. That's the
So
way it's
9
budgeted.
hours a week
Yeah.
then.
Which doesn't address your question, but I just wanted to add that in.
So that's 9 hours plus 7, so that's 16 hours, so it's 1 hour a week, basically under being a benefits eligible.
Well, it works out being, to be 16 hours a week. Is how that works out. If we're doing 4 hours.
Yeah,
extra a
16
month.
hours a week, right, so, okay. Anyway, I mean, I don't know, I don't know how hard it is to hire people, we keep hearing it's really hard to hire people. And so, I mean, Chris, you just went through hiring people, they were benefits eligible, and I'm just wondering if it makes sense to think about that. I know it adds for costs because of the health insurance component for paying and all, but it might be worth thinking about, and I'm sure we can find things for them to do.
Yeah, that's not a problem. And Roxanne, I actually don't disagree with anything you said. I would love to have more money to pay somebody to work more. I mean, I don't think based on just the sheer number of projects next year, it's a pretty significant workload. To be perfectly frank, I pushed in this budget that we stayed below the 20 hour threshold, largely because I didn't, I wanted to be conservative in terms of the board's willingness to accept, it's essentially a creation, not of a permanent new position, but one that would likely have financial impacts for the next couple of years for the town. So I was trying to balance serving the town's needs with also, a board who frequently is, anxious or concerned about that.
Well, I appreciate that you're trying to do that. I'm perfectly willing to argue it to the board. With you.
Then I would happily take your support on that. I mean, I think there's a lot of value to having this kind of position. Frankly, we're a top heavy entity, which isn't bad. I'm grateful that we've been able to retain so many high quality staff members, but I would really like to allow those staff members to focus on the projects we really hired them to do, instead of like scanning and digitizing files, which is what we need to do if we're going to invest, $15,000 to $20,000 in software for the planning department.
Is
there any hourly limit to what a project assistant can work per week? Would that trigger using a different job description? It's 20 hours.
I believe it's, you can work them up to 40 hours. It's just the limit with the project assistant is,
18
that's
months.
my understanding, is 18 months total,
Right, okay.
you know, spread out over a full-time position. So the clock starts ticking as soon as you hire them. And I will be perfectly honest with the board that this might be a situation where we discover that we have a great candidate, or we have a great person that we hire as a project assistant, and that we don't want to necessarily lose at the termination. And that's what happened with, I mean, what that happened with Michelle. I mean, that we don't want to lose them at the end of their set period of time in civil service. And so at that point, it would give us the flexibility to actually post for an administrative assistant 3 level in, or 2 or 3 level in civil service, of which they could take the test for. But if you go that direction, you have to pick from a list. So our candidate would have to hit, you know, would have to be in one of the top 3 people on that list, and based on the test. And so I see this as a position we could, if it works and it's serving long-term in the town, we could actually foster somebody who could move into a permanent position in the town. But we're not committing to doing that at this juncture with this type of role. Or the second.
I think that makes a huge amount of sense, and I personally could see arguing, supporting it, arguing is such a negative word, but for this for now, just because we're coming out of such a complex time with COVID and everything else, and we have these projects that we've committed to doing, the comprehensive plan review and revision, including these sustainability aspects of it, like looking at some of these things that are clearly becoming larger scale issues that Michelle's really been paying a lot of attention to, like with regard to disaster and, you know, things like that. There's other things that we've looked at, you know, potentially adding into that that's going to make it, you know, a bit more intensive and complicated, in addition to the regular comprehensive plan things that you want to do. But I think they're of huge value and very timely right now. And so having a little more help on that, so it doesn't take us 5 years to do it, I think is really good. And yeah, I mean, I just think everything else that we haven't had, we've been understaffed for quite a while. And so coming out of that, getting our planner up and going, getting everything together, Chris is, you know, just has a new helper now. There's just a lot that's back up because of that. And as you say, all these records transition things, we're making these IT transitions. There's just a lot of stuff that's going to be happening in the next year to year and a half. And I mean, I think it's a really good expenditure of not that much more funds. And we have a lot of money left because we had these understaffing things. So it's not like we don't have extra funds that we can use to get on our feet and get all these people going and balanced and everything. So I'm all for it. I'm happy to bring it to the board with you, Caitlin.
I think you bring a much more nuanced understanding of the challenges. I think from an outsider perspective, I've heard things be said even on the board that like, we have so many staff for such a small town, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, but you have an appreciation for what the actual workload is for that staff. And we have been understaffed now for more than a year. And it's had a huge adverse impact on existing staff. It's been very challenging. It's been very stressful. And so, you know, short of, you know, giving everybody 100% raise, which isn't obviously realistic or going to happen, having a little bit more assistance to help smooth and facilitate the actual work that we've accomplished. Because Michael, to your point, you don't want us to take on projects we can't actually execute. And I agree with you on that. And so this was meant to help facilitate the projects we've already committed to. And I can guarantee you there are going to be projects that show up in 2023 that we did not anticipate that we have to deal with also, because that's what happens every year.
And it just seems like there's a lot of grant funding possibilities right now. Some we've applied for, some we haven't yet. So I just think that adds another, you know, coordination layer.
Right, and it helps Michelle like have more time for the things that she's really skilled at and not have to do. I mean, it's the same with the construction manager argument, you know, it's just like, I mean, I think we're at a real sort of transition window, and we've got money for people that we budgeted and then we didn't spend. So now we really very clearly see where it's needed. And so, yeah, I mean, I think we should put it into these budgets that the project assistant totals 20 hours a week, and then we have to add whatever more for the mental health insurance, or that might be, and bring it to the board that way and see what they say. So I'm proposing that we change the A fund budget to, or the budgets across A and B. I can't be here for B. Probably, because I have another meeting.
So I just did a back of the envelope calculation. It's about to add 5 more hours and account for the possibility that that person would be paying 50% of the most expensive rendition of our benefits, which is a family plan. It's about $19,000 more across the 2 funds to add those 5 hours and count on them taking advantage of our health insurance, which is at that 20-hour rate. It's a 50% benefit versus 90 for those who work at the A fund. So that's that, or sorry, the A class A and be a
Right.
class B employee.
So that's like $9,500 extra for the 800.
Right, well, depending on how we would split it.
Right.
I would suggest we split it 50-50 just to make it easier for operationally.
Or maybe more, a couple more of the, like. Put 2 more, I would put a little bit more in the refund, just because.
12 hours in the
Well,
beginning.
just
and then 8
because you're
hours.
talking about staffing and notes for all these committees and everything, and the interface when people walk in and all. I mean, you can switch it back and forth, but okay, so I still would propose that we do that, and I would propose that you balance the funds of it using some of the unallocated fund balance, which we have accumulated a lot of, because we were understaffed for a long time. So that's my proposal.
So I just have another question about where this person's office space will be. And if there are any extra charges associated.
Oh,
with
yeah,
that.
well, we'll need a computer. I wonder. Well, I think we have that in some budget, actually. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we do, but I'll make sure we do.
Well, I can tell you what my dream is that the downstairs office currently occupied by code becomes half more of an administrative assistant office, or an office or a space that can be used by somebody who's staff, because I'd like to see a rotation of our code officer, our planner, and an administrative assistant actually serving in that front office space. And our new planner has plenty of experience doing that and being an interacting person with the department. I think if it's on a rotating basis, it's going to be a lot easier to know that you have dedicated time in your schedule to actually just focus on projects, which isn't happening in the current arrangement. And my idea is that we have that on that floor, we have or in that room, we have that front office person, whoever's serving in that role that day, as well as some conference space, so people can actually have meetings in there. Even though, because the conference room might not always be available for that kind of thing. And then actually move the planner and zoning officer upstairs, and reallocate the space that Will currently has to have Michelle to have her own private office. And because Will doesn't spend a lot of time in that office, but that's going to take some reorganization. That's going to that might take some money to do partitions and things like that. But I can tell you that that's kind of the tentative idea of how we would handle the spacing issue.
And couldn't potentially the office, I mean, right now, the office that Blixie's in is just one person, right? So, I mean, we used to have 2 people in that office, so. I mean, that might be a possibility.
It might be a possibility. Yeah.
They're not with people who aren't there full time anyway, so, I mean, we never, before this, I mean, I know the bookkeeper has a lot of work to do, but we never had a private office with a bookkeeper before, so. I mean, that might be a possibility too. For one of these people who aren't here all the time. Anyway, that's what how I propose that we put this in. So I'm
Yeah,
moving that,
um,
suggesting that, whatever.
Caitlin, so it sounds like what I'm hearing is that I think that what Roxanne was suggesting, the 1220.15, where it's currently, possibly gets moved to the line above at the 0.14. That makes sense to me. And then adding another hour in the A fund and another 4 hours, it sounds like, in the B fund.
Yeah, I think the B fund's really where, if we're gonna beef something up, I'd prefer it not to be the supervisor's office. I prefer it to be the planning
I
department.
think it would be 3, because you said it was 16 right now. So if
Well,
you added one-
16 a month, not a week. So right now it's 8.
Oh, wait, 7 a week here, and I thought it was
It's
8 a
8
week.
week, yep, and then 4 hours for meetings, so.
So 9 a week.
Right?
So,
It's 19 a week
right.
already?
no,
Wait, I'm sorry.
I've got
So
7
you
days.
determined that it was 9 hours a week, because Michelle's saying 8 hours a week plus 4 hours a month.
Yeah,
So that equals 9 hours.
yeah, yeah, so 3, yes, you're right,
So
you're right.
it's 3 in planning
Right,
and 1 in supervisor.
on
Makes it
paper,
20.
it's 15, right,
Yeah.
right now,
Right, correct.
Yeah. and we're
16.
saying, make it 20,
I thought it was 16, counting the 4 hours a month.
No,
that's not on paper, 4 hours a month.
Where is it?
We're saying it's not in there.
You haven't put it in anywhere. What?
No,
Who's on
you-
first?
You have 7 hours right now on this budget, you have 7 hours in
Yep.
the A fund.
Yep.
And 8 hours in
Yep.
the B fund,
yeah,
that's 15 hours.
Yeah.
And then where is this 4 hours a month?
it's also in that line. But we were thinking about it as a 15-hour a week position.
Oh, so it's
With-
counted in there, so you need 5 more hours, not
Yes.
4.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
We're talking 20, not 15.
Yeah, but I thought we needed 4 more hours more, but we need 5 more hours more.
Essentially.
Okay, got it.
And that distribution is 1 in supervisor. 4 in B. Right?
I think that's. what
Yes.
Caitlin was saying.
Okay, I think I understand what's going on. So,
I'm personally chuckling at home because this is probably the most complicated math we've had to do this entire season over hourly. Over the
well, not
number of
loud at
hours.
least, I've got a lot going on my
Yeah.
end, so.
Yeah.
All right, so 12 hours per week. Okay, and then just so everybody understands, the benefits will be split proportionally based on that 8 and 12.
Right,
Okay. All right, so that will be reflected in the tentative budget that you'll see at the end of this week.
so you have to vote on that, or?
No, the only thing that you have to vote on is changes to the tentative budget.
Oh,
So,
so in
because
these
this is-
meetings, I didn't know, it's just sort of a consensus, yes, we do that.
Yeah,
if
yeah.
People here agree, okay.
Yeah, we don't have a formal process for it, so. All right. Well, that changes things, but,
Oh, and the revenue for it would come out of.
okay,
You have to have a place to get the revenue, right? If you're adding money,
yeah, yes,
well, and I mean, just the notes for justifying why. we're using it.
right,
Because we saved a lot of money ourselves for quite a while, so
right.
that's why I'm saying.
Yeah. I'll make a note to include that in the narrative.
Right, because we don't want to add, we don't want to use the fund balance for things that are going to be ongoing expenses, but this is, as Caitlin said, not necessarily an ongoing expense, and it's making up for a loss that we have when we didn't have other salaries to pay
Right.
that were budgeted already.
I love this whole idea. I just. I think,
Which idea is that?
just, yeah, just having an admin assistant for the planning and code office, that'll help take some things off.
Yeah, that's essentially what Chris has been doing since.
Dealing with
Right.
the past year.
And it's a bit of backup when somebody's taking notes and doing things, they know how to work the electronic systems for the meetings and everything like that, so. A little more backup is the bad thing.
Even if it worked into, I think, full time, if it became half a year person.
That would be, way down the road.
Yes,
It's a good way,
it's gonna evolve,
it's a
right?
good way to try it out and see and get us on our feet
You're dating
after.
one and then-
After COVID, we had, transition in supervisors and lots of transition in the clerk office, and transition in the planning office, so,
So what's next?
yeah.
Down to
Moving on.
29.
So I think probably, I don't know, some items of note would be that are, based on what we're foreseeing our 2023 to look like. We're decreasing our attorney line, going into the 2022 budget. We had some pending items, which is why we boosted that line up. Those didn't come to fruition, so now we have some, we're budgeting $18,000 less than we did last year for the attorney line, so that's worth noting.
So the 2022 year to date, that can't be right.
We're on a lag. They bill us on a lag. It's
Yeah, because the last.
right, so that's only through August. So the bill that we just paid in September isn't included in that number.
Right. And we think it's gonna be cheaper, how? We're spending all.
Yeah, so our end of year estimate is what we're gonna be using to gauge our 2023 amount. So we added a little bit of an increase based on the hourly rate increase. So right now, that 39,542 is what we're estimating. And remember that there is an attorney line in the B fund, which you've seen some significant expenditures
Right.
out of that this year. So that's how we arrived at that. And Caitlin, is it still your understanding that that looks like a pretty reasonable number?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've had, as the board members well know, we've had lawyer costs that nobody could have foreseen as being something we would have to do this year. But I think that that's gonna be, I would use that as a safe number for next year.
Is there any estimate, I mean, you're not able to make this yet, going into next year, in terms of the LLC, is that what it's called?
LDC?
LDC for the Camp Barton, like paying, reimbursing for anything, or paying for attorney, are we gonna keep paying attorney fees?
Once the LDC is formed, the LDC will be responsible for having their own legal counsel.
So that'll be next week, I mean, next year, next week.
Yeah, exactly. So I would not anticipate that we're gonna need much more attorney time. I think the attorney time, frankly, that we've put into it. I want Nate to come. He's gonna join a meeting when we gather to help walk us through the paperwork as we've created it, but then it goes to everybody else's attorneys and it's gonna go to the boards. And I mean, it's all that, all that process. So I see the real work as mostly having already been completed, because once that corporation is formed, it's responsible for its own legal costs.
Right, so some of that, I'm just seeing that as a reduction in the attorney costs from this year, next year.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't.
That's one project that we've been putting. money
Right. Yeah, that really didn't eat up as much time as some of the other issues, quite honestly.
But it's just another one.
Yeah, it is. It is just another one. But then I think we're gonna swap out for dealing with water issues immediately. So,
But water is not in this fund.
Some of it will be.
No, it would be in the B fund.
Why is it even in the fund, other than the water funds? that we're doing?
Caitlin, so the B fund, we discussed this at our previous meeting.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't come to that one.
It's for new.
Yeah,
Any
Caitlin, do you want to
additional
provide the similar explanation about that?
about water.
Yeah, why it's coming out of the B fund?
Oh, what, I'm sorry, by what's coming out of the B fund?
Attorney fees.
Why attorney fees?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I was answering the question I was asked.
Yeah.
So, what we know is that, and I'm not trying to rehash anything unnecessarily. What we know is that Water District 1 was established, is not actually a water district, a formal water district under current state water law. It predates the formation or the establishment of the current law that we have to operate under when water districts are formed. we also know that that system, of which we don't own most of it, we own some of it. But it's, it's upwards of, well, parts of it went in the 1950s. And we have town residents who are using those water lines the town doesn't currently own. And it's been known for a number of years that, and the board chose not to pursue it in 2020. It was really early in my time on the board, chose not to get in the middle of unpacking it because COVID had just hit.
Right.
And so
Straighten all that out.
So what we need to do is we need to and what I'm going to be doing kind of after budget season is over is pivoting towards having legal review of Water District 1 in particular. I've had conversations with the village that the village is delighted to sell water, but wants to move away from what had happened, for many decades, which is that they ran water lines and connections to outside the village because they wanted to sell water, but they never set up the processes necessary to, frankly, secure the long-term water access for those residents. So I've had conversations with Nate, I've had conversations with Scott and Carissa and Michelle, and what we're looking at doing is paying for, currently allocating money to look at Water District 1 out of the B fund, and we have to do it out of the B fund until the town board takes a formal action that is going to, basically trigger the preparatory process for the formation of a new district. And should that new district be formed, first off, we don't know if we're even going to proceed with trying to establish a formal water district. We don't know if we're not even at that point.
Yeah.
We don't know what we don't know. So that's why we have to pay for it out of the B fund. Should we take that formal action, we'll be able to pass those costs on to the water district should it be formed.
Okay, so it's just like a one-time thing to solve that problem. Okay, thank you.
You could argue some of that should come out of the A fund because the village created it.
But it isn't a town-wide,
Yes, it is. It comes down South Street.
but in terms of what the controllers office is like town-wide expenses, it doesn't seem
Yes.
that is one, just because it comes.
Well, I would argue the other way,
Okay.
but I don't, we're down to 15 minutes, so I think we're getting off topic here.
So I think if it's okay to move on, I
Yes.
think it's one of the most important discussions we'll have today is about this 1620.2, the capital plan. There's a huge increase in this line in this budget year based on what the board, we've tried to keep the board in the loop about our changing capital plan for the town hall facilities. And so I believe I did circulate the capital plan via email, which is in super draft form. But I will zoom in, Caitlin, hopefully you can see it okay. And it might become a little more clear. So we're on, I don't know what page of the sub budgets, but it is. It's the first page, okay, so probably towards the bottom. These are this is what we're anticipating. We got into this a little bit the other day on the 13th, but this is what we're anticipating, a reasonable workload for town hall facility updates. And these are all tentative numbers. I had tried to get quotes. We actually are getting a painting quote today. So I'll see how correct that is. Well, they're doing a tour today. I don't know if I'm gonna get the quote back before the end of the week. I sort of doubt it, but I'm crossing my fingers. I'll ask that question. So this is a hefty work plan. We've discussed on the 13th, we discussed having a project manager for this, which I think is a wonderful idea. So these are large expenses that at this point in this version of the budget are being offset by ARPA at this point, including our IT and cybersecurity update, which we are estimating phase 1 to be about that $75,000. So these are big numbers, this is a big deal, but the town hall is one of our largest assets and that the painting and repairing of the outside is really needed as far as long-term structural integrity of the facilities. And the insulation work is something that we're, it was brought to my attention that when the HVAC system was installed, the installers stepped on the roof, the insulation that for the roof, which makes it not insulation anymore. So, and then this wall, it's been suggested by a couple contractors, getting this wall fully insulated to help with the temperature control in this space. So that's just a placeholder. I don't know how reasonable it is for insulation work. That ADA backdoor, I think we all are in agreement that that needs to be a priority. We've struggled to find vendors who can work with our timeline. So we're gonna have to go back out and, I think we're gonna be at the whims of scheduling.
What's the schedule issue?
We couldn't get anybody to provide a bid in time to work with that court grant, which is why we had to return those funds, the court grant funds.
Right.
And then just finding somebody to even give us a bid, because we put it out to bid and nobody had time in their schedule to say that they could do the work within the time that we are saying. So I think we're gonna have to be very flexible and schedule maybe even a year in advance or more. So, that's in there. It's offset by ARPA, so it doesn't affect the tax levy, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of these items are gonna end up in 2024, also offset by ARPA, but based on the industry right now, I'm not sure how much work we're gonna actually be able to get done. So we have put it out there. We put out lots of feelers, and having a construction manager will definitely be helpful in, being able to tap into those veins of communication and just general understanding of who's around, who does that kind of work. So lots of updates, but it's absolutely needed. It'll be really nice to have an ADA compliant backdoor entrance to the town hall in general,
Yeah, you have to make sure you call the right people
to do the work.
to whatever work you're gonna do.
Yeah, right.
You need to target the right contractor.
Right. Yeah, and the ADA backdoor, there are a couple local folks who just can't. They in their work schedule, they're
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah,
And
just be
those
careful
were-
who you call, is what I'm saying.
yeah. Well, luckily, we have a code officer who has.
That's what, be
who
careful
knows.
who you call.
No, and I've checked with him. So, and we've put out blanket requests, in the newspaper and things like that, but then also through this process, we've been talking to a couple different not I don't want to say unbiased sources who have been giving us references to different places that they're like, go with them, they're the best sort of thing. So yeah. So that's a big one. That's a big line. Are there any questions about this in particular?
So there's gotta be, is there something about that, or some lines hidden, because you've got 147, and I don't see that doesn't add up.
Yeah, so this is all of those.
75, that's 105 by itself.
Oh, 75 is Service Street. You might want to rank those too.
Yeah, they're ranked in here.
Well, and what I would do is you're putting them on there, put the IT cybersecurity like at the top of the list. Because if you're gonna cut anything, that's not something you're gonna cut.
Right. Yeah.
I just have a I guess a general philosophical question, and maybe this come up in a board discussion, but I guess the question is how to decide. I heard from the budget discussions last year of the board and the whole issue of, the fund balance and people not wanting it to be too large, but making a plan for using it for things that are not ongoing, but so. I guess just the philosophy of choosing to use ARPA money versus some of the fund balance money. And it seems like, we've got a window of time that we can use the ARPA money, so I was just wondering. About that and, instead of using the ARPA offset for all of that, especially like maybe the town hall stuff, for example, that we.
I think
use
isn't
some of the
ARPA
fund balance.
more constrained than the fund balance.
No, it's, none of them are very constrained, but one could view the ARPA money perhaps as some. Really extra programming or something for the town overall, and we do have time to figure it out, we don't have to spend it in this year. And we did have, from what I last saw, a reasonable fund balance that you want to move down some of it anyway, so, I mean, it's a philosophy of where you use it, but to me, it would make as much sense to use it, the fund balance there, and think about the ARPA money in a slightly different way, some of it, I mean, maybe you split it or something like that, or you use the. Those are one-time things that have to happen, a lot of those, and then it brings down your fund balance while still leaving a lot. I think we should leave a really good ample fund balance. I mean, I'm conservative in my view on that, I always have been, but at least it does start to do that, and it allows us to talk more about the ARPA money in terms of bigger picture town stuff, maybe something comes out while we're doing the comp plan and keep hearing all this stuff about problems with recreation in the town and facilities, fields, whatever, this is some huge thing apparently that the public wants, so they've never come and told us that, but perhaps it's true, and perhaps it will come out of a comp plan thing, and then maybe that is something that like the ARPA funds,
So we have
Might make
320
sense more.
for ARPA, is that right?
yeah.
Or 330, something like that?
Is one pot of money gaining more interest than another?
Not at this point, no, actually, we have invested our ARPA funds in the treasury ladder. So
Anyway,
I'm
that's
gonna
just
answer.
philosophy to talk about.
Right, yeah, and I'll respond to just a portion of that, which is that in the A fund, one of the reasons why I felt comfortable having large fund balances because we hadn't done what we needed to with the capital planning or multi-year planning and planning out 10 years. Like, I know that fund balance could be used to invest in our assets, to maintain our assets, but it was only anecdotal, which is why, you and I were on the same page about the fund balance stuff, but in this particular budget, we're adding, and it will increase based on the conversation we had on the 13th, so I'm just gonna scroll down to
That's the reserves.
the reserves, yeah, so we are, and this, so this is, right now, we have $195,000 directly appropriated from fund balance going into the capital reserve and the repair reserve. That there will be more money, based on the conversation that we had about the highway barn salt shed. I will be including that in the capital plan, the total, and including it in our reserve balance, our multi-year reserve balance planning. So that number will increase, and that's all coming from fund balance. So that is a good chunk of our fund balance going directly to reserves in this budget. And then, I guess for the rest of the conversation about the ARPA funds usage, I could say a lot of things, and I hear what you're saying for sure. Yeah.
Well, you wouldn't hear me complain about using ARPA funds to buy property to have rec fields because we're one of the few towns in the county that doesn't have public fields.
Yeah, I'm just saying that might be something, it's something that there's a whole bunch of rumors, a big problem, but nobody's ever brought to the board, at least that I've ever heard in all the meetings I've sat in, which is like a lot over the last 6 years. But anyway, it may come out of the comp planning or whatever, we do have a little bit of time there, and I don't know, to me, like these ARPA funds came showing the public that we really are using them for something for the public. I think would be nice.
What's
if
the
we could.
deadline on your ARPA funds?
It's like 2025 or something.
They have to be, what's it called?
Allocated?
Not allocated, but you have to essentially be in contract for their use by the end of 2024. So even if you haven't spent it, you have a contract on file that says we're going to spend this money by the end of
Right.
2026. It's gotta be out the door.
Right.
But you have to have
So
it
I-
contracted.
So we're gonna have trouble spending. I think you should put it
But not-
maybe to the cybersecurity first. Because that's something we're gonna get done. We're gonna allocate the personnel resources for, and we will get that done. The rest of this is really intangible, and we're not sure we can get it done.
So I guess when we see how the fund balance all shakes out, and we write that out, like of what we have and stuff, but I guess maybe I'm just suggesting, considering, seeing how it shakes out to use maybe do the 75 as Michael wants for the ARPA funds, but like look at the rest coming out of the fund balance and saving out more of the ARPA funds while we sort of look at what other things we could do for the whole community with that really unanticipated money that people might view more as a community thing than fixing the town hall. Though it is our asset and it is for the community, but I'm just trying to see. Anyway. So I'm just suggesting maybe looking at the 70 cap, I guess it's almost that, 70,000 or whatever. If that can come out of fund balance, and fund balance is still reasonable, the other stuff that you're saying, then use the 75,000 dollars is.
The board actually had conversations like this last fall too, about wanting to use ARPA funding for like special projects. I mean,
Well, the discussion we just had prior to this was hiring somebody to help us get this done.
Yeah.
Right?
we have exterior work that has to be done on the building. It's just a question of how we're paying for it. It's not an optional thing.
Yeah, no, it's just how we're paying for it, it's not.
Right, but we can put all kinds of stuff in here. We have trouble. These people are,
Right, but we just figured out how to do that.
how to do what?
We made the project assistant, we're making it.
Right, until
construction
the person
manager,
gets here, they don't have any bandwidth to do any more work.
But I'm not.
They can't get any more done than they're getting done now.
I'm not suggesting that at all.
Yeah.
I'm just suggesting that those things that are just repairing the town hall and things, instead of using ARPA money, we use fund balance if we look at it and see that it makes
Yeah.
sense in Michelle's budget, because to me, the ARPA funds, as Caitlin said, I think it would be nice for the public to be able to see, something other than, well, we lowered your taxes, but we didn't raise your taxes, but we still have a bunch of fund balance, like. It's partly just the public seeing the use and all, and so not using that all on these things when maybe we have the fund balance to do it, so people don't look at the budget and say, oh, no, because they don't understand what you say the fund balance for, but still, if we can balance those things, I would like to just see how that pencils out, is all I'm saying. It doesn't have to do with really getting things done. It's just how it's paid for. So that was my suggestion, if we could look at that, when we balance out all of them. Okay, thank you.
Caitlin, did you want to say anything about any of that? Do you have anything?
No, I'm not in philosophical disagreement necessarily. I think that we clearly have to get some of the work done. And it just depends on how we want to pay for it.
One last thing before we go, for the parking lot. If that ought to be an easy one, if you want to call some, and we have a survey, call somebody to about mill and pave it. Just-
Yeah, I wish it was simple. So we got a quote for it, but it didn't include milling. And it also didn't include any stormwater abatement features, which I think probably it would make sense if we're going to redo it. I think we probably should make some considerations about, can we plant a tree somewhere? Is there something that we can do to not just have it be runoff? We know that the permeable.
So if you want to do that, you then call like TG Miller. And they can come up with a plan for you,
Yeah,
because you can't do that by seat of the pants.
no,
So
Right.
you can,
Right.
there's plenty of companies that will mill and pave it, and you have a storm drain in the middle. Or if you want to do something different, then you would call Trowbridge and Wolf or TG Miller or
yeah,
something, and then put You could get that in a line item, maybe use ARPA funds for that or
Yeah,
something.
yep, yeah, and that is.
If you want to expand the scope, but then what you're talking about, you need to get, like we did in the front, a plan together. This is what we want to do, and then and they'll be able to recommend a couple of companies.
Yep,
too.
yep.
That's the approach that we take. with it.
Yep, and that is the plan. I've had a designer just come take a friendly look. And it was interesting, the difference between the conversation I had with them versus the conversation with the paving company, who just came and gave us a quote. The paving company didn't think we had to mill it, and then the designer was like, I think you have to mill this based on the grade. So, I think we
The
need to
grade,
get.
the grade is fine, but it's shattered. You have to either mill it, but if you get a designer and they can take a couple of tests and see if there's a good base underneath it,
Yeah,
because once you mill it, if you get down to the base, then
yeah,
that may be complete removal.
Yeah.
But most paving companies, the bigger ones will not, you don't want to drive it.
yeah. I got what I thought was.
And that's where the 100,000 came from.
No, it was 50 without milling. So,
So anyway, you got that in for future,
yep,
so
yep. All right,
are we done?
well, it's 12:02 and we haven't, finished this. But, we did go through this on the 13th. And discuss most of these, bigger changes, so. So, what are we gonna keep going? What's our plan here?
What more do we have?
Well, we have, a line that we skipped last time on the 13th, the youth program lines, there is an increase in that based on our contract with the youth commission and the village. So there's an increase in that.
I got to leave in like 15 minutes, I could still be doing this one,
Okay.
and another meeting at 1 o'clock, but I have to Zoom from the house.
Okay.
I guess I could Zoom from here since the conference is open now, so I could then stay a little longer.
Michelle, I got about 5 more minutes because I got to get on another call and then another call at 12:30. So
Something in particular you want to target, Caitlin?
yeah, I was gonna ask where, and honestly, I can't even, I'm sorry, my brain is not functioning. It's full speed right now. Michelle, is there anything else do you want to review while I'm here that makes more sense?
Do you want to talk about the youth programs, the changes in that? Wise to have that discussion.
Yeah, if you want to open up the sub budget, we can do that quickly.
Sure. This is where it comes out. What do you want me to, this is where it shows up in our budget here.
Right. Well, the youth program overall is the combination of our rec program. And our rec program's coming in at about a total of about $111,000 this year, or for 2023, of which the town by taxpayer is subsidizing to the tune of about $11,000, so 10%. The village subsidizes that the equally per our MOU with the village. The rest of that budget is all programming that happens. It's offset by revenue by the programming itself. So I personally think that that's great. And we actually, I don't think you guys know this yet, but we, starting October 1st, we're taking over the community rec program that was previously run through the school district. We'll get to continue to use the school district's facilities for free. But we're going to provide the structure, provide an opportunity for the individuals to register through us directly. It's a win for the town because we can keep the rates low. It's going to cost about $10 a month for adults to participate in each different program. They're basketball, volleyball, indoor soccer. So we can keep the rates low. They'll pay for the insurance. We'll pay a little bit of money for actual equipment, but it's a very low overhead program that we did not budget for this year as a revenue source, but it's going to turn out to be some revenue for us in 2022. And it should be a good little revenue stream in 2023. It's not reflected in here because this literally, we got the announcement last week that it was approved by the school district, and we don't know how much revenue it's actually going to generate. We'll have a much better idea next year, but it's definitely going to, so either way, we're looking at about 110,000 total for the rec program. And then we also we split the cost with Ethan's program. He came and presented to us the rural youth services program that we're contracted with Cornell Cooperative Extension. That program is equally divided between the town and the village. There was increase in costs associated with that. And it's frankly money we don't get to control because we don't set their budget. But there are cost of living adjustments for Ethan, as every employee is now, getting cost of living adjustments. So there's adjustments there. And then we're continuing at a flat rate to fund the standard request from the library for the summer reading program. And then the final item is, what is the final item? I think, did I just actually cover everything? There's one more. What am I missing? Oh, youth employment. Oh no, and the final item is a contract that the town has already approved. Back in March, the town board approved the proposed contract with the rec partnership through the Ithaca Youth Bureau. And the biggest increase of all is actually associated with that contract percentage wise. It went from 7,000 something to 9,000 something. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact number off the top of my head. But the board's already approved that contract. And that's a fixed cost. So that's where the biggest percentage increase actually comes from.
So is all that in 70-20 and 73-10?
Michelle? It gets spread out throughout our budget, and she knows the lines.
Yeah, so the expenditure side can be seen in 70-20, the rec program.
Yeah.
And then the 73-10.
So everything she just went over was in those two
Yep.
areas. Okay.
Yep.
That's good. Yeah, so that's it.
And the way that it works out, the way that we have contracted with the village is that essentially when all this is said and done, the town for youth and rec programs is paying an equal amount as with the village, is the way that works. When the money the ins and outs are all said and done, out of pocket is the same amount as the village, which the way that you'll know year after year what that number is pretty tricky actually. But it's caught up in these two revenue lines. This youth services OG and rec services OG.
So after you figured out the appropriations and the revenue, whatever credit or balance is left is shared with the village.
Correct. Yes, that's theoretically how it's supposed to work. So
What lines are those?
which ones? The revenue lines? Is that what you're,
The
Yeah.
OG,
those are,
Not 124 and 125. It's not the same as 124 and 125. So what is it? 20? It's too blurry. I can't-
120
Yeah.
to 121.
20 or, oh, yeah, those are the lines. 120, 121, but it's.
Oh, okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And then there is a detail which I'll include in the tentative budget to those two lines, which gives you a little bit more of the background of how they're developed on the youth commission side. But for the 2023 budget, the village, the town village and the village contribution each is $35,977.
So do those reflect the increase? 2350 and 2351?
No, because the revenue is only increasing by, the amount that 35,977 is increasing. Which last year
Where's the?
it was like
35,000?
30. It is in this youth and recreation revenue detail, which you haven't gotten a copy of, but you'll get it in the tentative budget. Sorry that it wasn't included. I forgot to include it in this one.
So 70/21 goes up by 11,000. Which. Right, we'll pay 5,500, what you're saying.
I don't know if I'm following your maths.
Well, so you were going over the revenue,
Mhm,
2350 and 2351. Are like 73,000.
mhm. So the,
And this adds up to 200,000. 70/20 and 73/10.
well, there's also. Outside of that are the recreation charges. So that's another stream of revenue. That is outside of the youth commission budget. But,
Which is the 87,000.
right, yep. Yeah, there was a flow chart at some point that had been developed that I think we could recirculate and, you know, this is one of those. It made sense to me once I was actually at the meeting. Because I had a hard time wrapping my mind around how this all worked until I was at that meeting and heard the discussion, and got the context. So yeah, it is a convoluted system, but that 87,000 does offset. The overall cost of the youth and rec services. And is accounted for when we're looking at how all these numbers wash out and compare it to what our contract with the village should be versus what we've actually paid out. So,
Yeah, there's revenue towards the total youth commission budget that comes from the county, and the county increased, I believe it's 15% this year, their contribution to all the towns, because they have been underfunding us for years. And so they increased it substantially this year to catch us up to where we should be. And then from there on, they'll do the like standard 2 to 3%. And we also, Will has also gotten outside funding from United Way that helps offset as well.
And that's someplace else in here, or is that in the 2001?
The United Way actually goes to youth and rec services.
So
So it's
2350.
like 2350 and 2351.
Yeah.
Symbol.
Yeah, because those are about 160, so there's another 40,000 in funding for those someplace.
Say it again.
So I see about 200,000 for 70/20 and 73/10.
Expenses. and
Yes.
appropriations.
And those three lines are about 160. 2001, 2350 and 2351.
I'm gonna have to hop off. I'm sorry, but I think
Okay, why don't you just call the meeting then?
I think the easiest thing to do for this in particular is maybe we can share the youth commission budget that was finalized. Because I think it gets wonky when it gets turned into our budget, because it's such a complicated source of rounds of different money allocations, because some of the money from the county doesn't necessarily come directly to us. It goes to rural youth services to offset some. So it's, you know.
No, I was just trying to follow through in the budget.
Yeah, and it's really hard to follow through in the budget. And so I think if you actually could see the document the youth commission works with, and I was trying to grab a quick copy of it. I don't have the final copy. I have the working document. I think if you could see that, it would make a lot more sense.
Okay.
So you guys can keep going without me, but I will move to adjourn
Second.
a public meeting second, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye. Thank you.
I feel better, Caitlin. So Michelle, I have a question, which is, you,
No, not yet.
there had an email about,